Yeah, because I was just thinking as you were saying all of that, that what your point is that unless the Palestinians are involved in what's going forward, it becomes like a house that doesn't have proper foundations. The
Exactly.
house will not work.
Exactly.
So, I mean, with the pressure hopefully coming on from the rest of the world and the pressure coming from Jewish people, because that becomes a crucial aspect,
Yeah,
and much more Jewish people probably need to support the what those brave Jewish people are
yeah,
doing
I
because they're
wanted
yeah
like to praise these support that come from the Jewish people. I know that after the 7th of October, we saw like hundreds of Jewish people protest in New York, and we see that there are still voices, Jewish voices. Are are unhappy, or they don't agree with what Israel is doing against the Palestinian people. Um,
Mm.
I see this, as you said, this letter that was wrote, and previously there was another letter. I met a couple of weeks an American actor, and he was speaking about. I'm not going to mention his name, but I mean, he was speaking about Marwan Barghouti and the release of Marwan Barghouti, and this man that he was calling for the peace and the two-state solution. This actor, he said that the change of the American voice is is growing, and of course, not denying the good voices of the Jewish people in the United States. I was reading a book on my way to Clon Mail this morning, for President Mahmoud Abbas. He wrote a book about the history of Palestine and the struggle of the Palestinian people. And he mentioned IPAC, and he mentioned how we can really manage to communicate with the Jewish people in America, and that we can have a dialogue, we can open. This has happened, during Rabin, when we signed Oslo with Paris and some other of the Jewish figures, and we signed the peace, the Oslo Accord. There are voices, there are Jewish voices who support the Palestinians, and who are not don't accept what's going on by the government of Israel. And one of the most prominent Israelis is Gideon Levy. He's a journalist in Haaretz, and he's really, I mean, recently I see him, of course, Ilan Pape and others. So we need to encourage these Jewish voices. Israel must listen to the people who are really, really care about the future of Israel. Um, and I was reading something as well, uh, Israel must be protected from itself, from the people who are really are very fanatics. Um, I see that Israel is destroying itself. Yes, it's attacked the Palestinians, it's killing the Palestinian, bombardment, destroyed Gaza, and continue with its plans in colonization in the West Bank. But I see that Israel, if they don't stop and realize that there is a nation, and this nation is really fighting for their justice and freedom for the past 70 decades and more, I don't think that they will. I see that they are destroying themselves.
yeah, and you see, I agree. I mean,
There must
probably
be a Jewish voice to protect Israel from itself.
absolutely, and my feeling is that it's going to be crucial that there is a Jewish voice, and but the Jewish voices that have condemned the genocide is one side of it. But there's, I think, something of really central importance as well, which is the amount of Jewish rabbis who really understand Judaism are making it very clear that Zionist Israel is the enemy of Judaism. It's the actual enemy of the whole core of what their religion is. And that voice is now starting to come out much more clearer with the number of rabbis that are pointing that out. And if that increases, I think it could put an enormous pressure back on because the biggest anti-Semitic force in the world at the moment is the Jewish government. I interviewed Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He had a big position in the American government. And he said in the interview that Netanyahu is the biggest cause of anti Semitism in the world. which is inevitable, because if people are seeing what's going on in Gaza, they will obviously, the danger is they will project it onto the Jewish people without making the distinction between Zionism and Judaism.
We know, I mean, the Palestinians are really very clever, and we always differentiate between the Jewish as a religion and the Zionist and the Israelis who are Zionists. The Jewish people live in Palestine and in the Arab countries in very peacefully. We never had an issue with this, and anyone who start to say something about it, it's a big lie. They were like hundreds of them, thousands of them in Iraq, in Yemen, in Egypt, in Morocco. These people, if you go and ask them, they will tell you that we were treated as normal as any other, like, religion. We are the nation of, or the citizen of Morocco, or citizen of Iraq, or citizen of Yemen, and they were forced to leave to Israel because the population at the time, before the partition plan, yes, there were like 30% of the Jewish people arrived in Israel. Originally, it was only 1% of the Jewish people, like, of Jews live in Palestine. We still have some hundreds of them live in Nablus. It's an area, a city in Palestine, where it's called Gerizim, like mountain, and they considered them originally the Jewish people. They are Palestinians. They believe, of course, they are Jews, and they practice their religion in area in Palestine. However, like, their numbers is few, but they used to have a representative in the Palestine Legislative Council when there was yes, there was one representative. However, they are like few people, but they are still live in Palestine. They are still live peacefully among the Nablus people, the Palestinian people. So the idea of Israel and Zionism and colonizations, it's completely different from Jew. And we, the Palestinians, know this very well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And your point is, I think, very important that you're making about the Jewish people that live in countries that are, like, for example, I saw an interview with a number of Jewish people in Tehran recently, and they were condemning totally what was happening, but also they were saying how well they're treated in Tehran. There's none of this. So the Holocaust, the safest place for Jewish people in the 1940s, 1930s was in that part of the world, not in the West, because the West is what created the Holocaust. But the problem is, the West, there's a sort of an unconscious guilt that has pervaded the Western mind, and consequently that leads to the prejudice, which unfortunately is, if the West is responsible for something, that's one thing, but they mustn't cause other people to suffer the consequences of what they're responsible for. And to a large extent, that's what's been happening.
We become the victims of the victims.
Absolutely.
Actually, this is many of like, our Palestinian prominent people. I heard it from Dr. Afif Safia, our representative, our former representative to London. And of course, I think the saying, it was from Edward Said, we are the victims of the victims. Yeah. So this is what Israel makes it like, repeat the killing of the Palestinians. We're not denying the Holocaust, but I mean, what happens against the Palestinian in Gaza was even worse than as some said in the world about what happened in Gaza. I know that until now, Israel preventing journalists to arrive or to go or to allow them to be in Gaza to see the mass destruction that they did and the suffering of the Palestinians. Yes, there are doctors coming sometimes, some of the UN organizations, but we need a real journalist to go and see and witness and document this genocide. It's very important to be seen by their eyes and to be, yes, I know that many reports came from Gaza about the genocide, about the destructions, about the suffering of the Palestinians, about the traumatized, 2 million Palestinians who live in Gaza at the minute. we lost more than 250 journalists because Israel doesn't want this to be told, to be given to the whole world. So we ask Israel to open the world, to open the place. I mean, there are many journalists arrive to Israel. They document and they talk, they speak about like, the 7th of October, but Israel prevented to allow them to go. Actually, it's dangerous. But now, if we see that there will be like, and I hope that there will be complete ceasefire, like the journalists to be given the opportunity to go and see this,
Yeah,
and to
because
tell the truth to the whole world, like, the truth that's seen by Western media will be different, will be differently perceived by the whole world. Regardless, I know that the millions around the world, they see and they believe and they support the Palestinians.
yes, and of course, throughout this whole thing, the international press was never allowed into Gaza. But as you're pointing out, at some point they're going to be going in there, and then the stories are going to become much more visual, and it becomes less an abstraction then, because sometimes when people hear about, well, 10 people have been murdered, it's like an abstraction. But what takes it out of the realm of abstraction, just an example, in a church in Australia, I think last week, these volunteers decided to have a liturgy, and they called out the name of every child that's been documented as being killed so far. These are only the documented cases. They went for 30 hours. In reading out each name, it took 30 hours in that church to read out all the names. So it brings the enormity of what's taken place. But as you say, when the international press get in there, and that's going to happen, I think, maybe fairly soon. That could make a huge difference.
And we have as well the Palestinian who evacuated, like, from Gaza in the past few months. Whoever, like, holds foreign passports, or the children who were evacuated for treatment. I know that, like, Ireland accepted 30 children to come from Gaza to be treated here in Ireland. So far, I think 19 child already arrived with their, like, guardians. These are the stories that was told. Yes, they spent half of the war in Gaza and saw this, like, savagery, and endure, like, this savagery genocide, this savagery bombardment and killing. Half of the story we heard from them. But I'm sure that the minute that more press will come into Gaza, the more the whole world will realize the amount of misery, the amount of injustice, oppression. I don't know what to say. How this genocide was, like, was denied over the months of allowing Israel, providing Israel with arms and money to continue its genocide against the Palestinian people. But with all the misery, with all the traumatized people, with all the destructions, I still feel, and we won this, because I realized that we belong to this land. We deeply rooted to this land. The minute that I see still millions trying to remain and to find a way of living, even though it's really very sad. I mean, and it's really very very difficult to see how the people, trying to survive. Like, I know that they survive this life every minute by minute, second by second, but now they are trying to survive a different life. How to live in this destruction, how to live without water and electricity and telecommunications. I know that the international community, they send, like, aid, but even the aid that they agreed on this plan, it's 600 trucks to come into Gaza, and not more than, like, 200, sometimes less, to arrive in Gaza. And I still wanted to emphasize that it's not a humanitarian cause. It's a human rights and justice cause. yes, we need the aid, and we need this aid to be allowed into Gaza without any bargaining, without any pressure. But we are not a humanitarian aid. So the stories that will come from Gaza, even it will be more clarity over the suffering will come to the whole world. We don't want like only sympathy and like, yes, I understand this, but we need this sympathy to be interpreted into actions. And the action is where the Palestinians deserve a state, a free state, and they have a just cause. And this is where we wanted the international community to see the Palestinians. We're not just a people who are like, want the aid and want to eat and drink. This is essential, and this should not be bargained according to the UN Charter. It's essential. But freedom, our aspiration for freedom must be respected, and the international community must reflect this on a practical measures and actions to support the Palestinians.
And I've heard you speak before about making that huge distinction between sympathy and, I suppose, responsibility, because it's not sympathy. It's simply getting what's belonging to you. In 1948, there was the Palestinian state created. It's not that you're looking for something that wasn't belonging to you from the very beginning. So there's that aspect. The other thing that intrigues me is, and I think it's probably reflected in the courage of the Palestinian people, to some degree, it's reversed the biblical story of David and Goliath. In other words, the real David in this story are the Palestinians, and Goliath is the Jewish state. It's almost like it's a symbolism of this being able to stand up against this massive force bigger than yourself, which I think the Palestinians have managed to persist, because as far as I can see, most Palestinians are remaining in Gaza and remaining in the West Bank. They're not allowing themselves be tyrannized and moving so much.
So I wanted to just to point out to something, that the role that played by Egypt and Jordan, not like, not allowing the plans of Israel to displace the Palestinians. I know that they see that the closure of Rafah, or like, not having Palestinians in different places, because this is what makes the Palestinians, this is belong to like Gaza is Palestinians, the West Bank is Palestinian land, and the Palestinian people must remain, because this is their country and this is their land. And when the Egyptians, they just prevent this, yes, the closure might, some people, they say it's like, severe. They are always criticized, but we as the Palestinian leadership see that the position of Egypt and the position of Jordan is strongly valued, because this is what makes these arrangements, or these like, plans for displacing the Palestinians to be null and to be stopped. I just wanted to point out, while you were talking about this, that Egypt and Jordan played a strong role in,
because they wouldn't have
yeah.
And in Ireland, we have this saying, maybe it's elsewhere, but certainly in Ireland, the importance of standing one's ground, standing your ground. See, it is your ground. So the importance of standing your ground becomes very important. And the other thing that strikes me is, we can't change history, but there's always the need to learn from it. But in order to learn from it, you have to be aware of it. So for so many decades, the whole world was totally unaware of the history of what was factually going on in the state of Israel. But now it's becoming much more visible. And just before we maybe open it up to some questions people might like to ask, something I came across recently, there was a new book out called On Anti-Semitism. It's by a guy called Mark Mazur. It's only just been published, but a very interesting piece of information he was able to relate. The Israel Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, who was one of the first prime ministers, the founder actually, admitted in private that Arab hostility had nothing to do with anti-Semitism and everything to do with land, as he told Nathan Goldman, founder of the World Jewish Congress in 1956. So this playing on this word anti-Semitism has gone back as far as then, but as it's not really what the Israeli state. I mean, everything that anybody would do, Netanyahu would say it was anti-Semitic, and these other.
It's the easy way to accuse the whole world of supporting justice. I don't want justice.
Exactly, absolutely, and justice is a good word to finish this interview on.